Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, let's talk about seller financing versus installment sales. We're gonna look at the two items. Are they the same? Because if you Google search, a lot of people say they're the same. Some people say it's different. So I'm gonna offer you my research and my take on it, but do consult your professional to make sure that you have the right information for your tax situation. And also every state kind of treats this differently, right? Because this is not just tax, right? But it's also, on the other hand, the legal implication of the properties, and this is where different state has different rules and regulations, so you want to make sure that you check the right sources, right? You want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. So I'm going to offer you my take on it, and then you can let me know what you think. So in the current lending environment, so both buyer and seller of residential property facing many challenges, right? So when traditional borrowing becomes difficult due to tight lending market or other financing factor like high interest rates, seller financing and installment sale contract emerge as viable alternatives. So basically I'm saying that both of these are alternative and they are different. So let's look at them. So these two methods serve different purposes, and the choice between them depends on whether one is considered during the perspective of the buyer or the seller. So first one we want to talk about is seller financing. So seller financing involves the seller acting as the lender, right? So this is the key, lender. In this arrangement, the buyer signs a promissory note in favor of the seller, and the seller provides a deed to transfer the property title to the buyer. So the buyer also signs a mortgage, granting the seller a lien on the property as security for the promissory note payment. So this financing method benefits the buyer by giving them full ownership and control of the property, with the seller retaining lien rights. Conversely, the seller loses ownership interest in the property and cannot use it as collateral or create any liens against it for a third party. So according to the mortgage in the county recorder's office, notifies the public of the seller's lien on the property, protecting the seller if the buyer decides to sell or further encumber the property. If the buyer defaults on the promissory note, the seller's only recourse is to sue the buyer, right? So typically they'll foreclosure proceeding, right? During foreclosure, the buyer can defend their rights and redeem the property. Other lien holders can also assert their interests. If the seller succeeds in foreclosure, they can obtain a judgment against the property and the individual for any deficiency. So really think about mortgage company, right? So basically, in this sense, the seller basically kind of replace the mortgage company for the buyer, right? Because with the mortgage company, the buyer has the ownership, and the mortgage company only have a lien on the property, right? They actually not actually own the property anymore. So let's look at the second situation with installment sales. So in an installment sale agreement or installment contract, so it's a contract between the buyer and the seller for selling the property over time. The buyer makes periodic payments to the seller, typically monthly, and the seller retains legal title to the property. So remember, this is the key. The seller retains legal title to the property, while the buyer holds equitable title based on their payments. This method generally favors the seller. Since the seller retains title, they can use the property as collateral unless restricted by the agreement. If the buyer defaults on payments, the seller may declare the buyer's right to forfeit it, retaining the buyer's previous payment as liquidated damages. However, the law typically disfavors forfeiture. Courts have issued rulings to protect the buyer's equitable interest, limiting forfeiture to cases where little have been paid toward the purchase. So similarity between the two methods, right? So both seller financing and installment sales usually require the buyer to pay taxes, insurance, and maintain the property. In seller financing, the responsibility arises from ownership and the mortgage terms, while in installment sales, they are contractual and flexible. Both methods give the buyer an insurable interest in the property, either as the legal or equitable owner. Title insurance is crucial to protect against unknown title defects. Additionally, both methods enable real estate transactions when traditional financing is unavailable. So when considering selling a property using these methods, both parties should carefully review and understand the agreement. So a lot of time, the term that they use on the agreement might not be clear, but you read through all the terms of the agreement, like the name of the agreement, they might say it's seller finance, they might say installment sales. So that tells you quite little about what the agreement actually is. So you have to read the term carefully to see who retained the ownership of the property. So that is the key. So if you are a seller, what is more advantageous to you would be retaining the ownership. So in case the buyer default, you have more protection to take back the property and all that. But as the buyer, if you can retain the ownership of the property, the more you can retain the ownership and just have the seller being as much as, treated as the regular mortgage company, then that gives you more flexibility and give you more rights. So it's really depending on the term of the contract. So read those carefully and consult with your professionals, especially for your state, because state law vary between state to state. So take care and happy investing. If you have any questions, put in the Q&A. Thank you. Bye.